yourself that chance to be more successful. That will be your motivation. Besides that, that daily motivation might not be there. You've got that strong burning why behind it. What do you think, Mom?
Oh, I think that I've done it so many times where it's like I'll just do that activity and it feels shallow. And
Mm,
if I really am honest about it, I think there's been lots of times I just didn't give myself that much credit. Like I thought that would be enough to sustain me. You're right. The motivation is the thing that wanes, but there's some discipline that's involved and also a larger view. And so it reminds me of how when I have something that's in front of me that feels just like two-dimensional, like it's like, so if I look at something that's like a picture, I get this and I'll remember certain aspects of it because I can see all these features. If I look at a video and I see action and I see different colors and movement, that goes to a stickier place in our brain. So I'm
mm,
always trying to find, if it's a behavior, I want to move toward who do I actually want to become? So that's a bigger question to distill down than the actual behavior. And I also want to just give it a bunch of texture and some, details about it so that it's not just this small thing, but it's got tentacles all over the place. So it takes a lot to grab my attention. I think that's where I've landed, is that I used to think I could just kind of say something and it would happen. I really have to go to some further lengths to make it so personal and that I can't escape, that that's exactly what my heart desires. And so then it's much more clear of a path for me of sometimes it's about the behavior, sometimes it's about just showing up, and sometimes about keeping my eye on the prize of who do I want to become.
mm.
So I think it's just a larger conversation than just the behavior, to your earlier point. And that's what I feel the messages are these days, are like, just focus on that thing. And that's just too thin.
Mm.
That's not enough. It's not enough. And it's not how our brains work. Our brains work with more detail that taps into our emotional state too. Now I'm
Yes.
invested on a couple different levels. So it's like if one kind of fails and there's another one right on board, that
Yes.
so the support team is built.
Mm.
That's the visual I'm seeing. The support team is built to make this thing happen and allow me to keep having at least a little bit of momentum going forward, because it doesn't have to be this big rush. It can be little bits, and the little bits that we keep coming back to over and over again. So here's one of those kind of red flag things. It sounds familiar, but where does this show up in your life where it's like we talk about the little behaviors, you keep adding
Mm.
them up. Those are the people that get to where they want to go, be who they want to be, follow through with what they said they wanted to because they kept showing up in little ways and they kept doing it over and over again. So again, we're rewriting how we think about progress. And then I think another layer to that is, what is success? And that's a big question when I'm trying to visualize who I want to be and what this looks like. It could be like, okay, I want to work out early in the morning, or I want to lose 10 pounds or whatever it is. Then, I just have to put more texture around it so that it makes more sense to me than just what that is. I need more. And I'm not alone. Like, this is how brains work. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's how it lands for me. And so that's another thing too. When we're talking about something, and if we bring up examples and they don't fit 100% for you, but you're like, well, this is how it looks in me, then you go with that.
Mhm.
Oh, because if we spark some interest or it pings you in some way where you're like, oh, and your inner wisdom kicks in, like, this is what it looks like for me, that goes. That's exactly a great progression of hearing information and then having it sit in a place for you that is really personal and really customized. So if you're having that every now and again, good job.
Yeah, I love that, making it personal. And again, some of the things and examples we give might land directly. That's awesome, cool. But some of them, like you said, maybe you're not experiencing it the same way, but how are you experiencing it? And then you're turning it to you and you're thinking about it. And I had mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but I kind of have these like forever goals. I consider them like, it's not one that I'm going to re-up it's not one that I'm going to change all the time. It's one that's consistent, right? Forever.
Mhm.
And I think one of the top ones is getting to know myself better. And so again, even when I'm listening to you talk, Mom, or when I'm reflecting on my own examples, like just that understanding that some of these things are going to land real nice and sweet, and some of them you try on, no, and you're allowed to do that, right? You're allowed to do that. How does it work for you? What works for you? what is motivating you, sparking your interest, right? All the things. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And so what you said about adding texture to your goals, like 100%. You're going to be more successful if you've got these other, like you said, the tentacles there, right? It's not this all or nothing. Oh, I don't feel like doing the behavior today, so it goes away. And I think that does happen when it's a shallow type of goal. If it's not, burning a fire in your heart of why you want to do it, then Matt, you don't care, it goes away. So, think about that when you're setting up your goals. Maybe again, doing that activity. Why? Like, what is your why? A second strategy that maybe you don't want to focus on would be if you have a goal that involves avoiding something bad, or on a similar but different note, avoiding pain. So studies have shown that you're less likely to reach your goal if it's about avoiding something or taking something away. Because in our brains, if we're taking something away, even if what we're taking away is what we consider a bad habit, that doesn't feel good, right? It feels like we're losing something. And so one of the ways to flip that strategy is, what can you add that's good? So if your goal is about, again, taking something away, not eating something that's certain or not doing a certain activity, can you instead add more of what you would consider the good? So like, instead of quitting smoking, maybe it's, I'm going to walk 10 more minutes a day. So you're adding something that's positive, putting you in that trajectory. And then, the idea is, if you're building up more of these good habits, then you can start to tackle some of those big ones that feel hard to do. I don't know. What do you think about that, Mom?
Wow, you're inspiring me in ways that are not even in my notes here as you're speaking. So thank you on that. Yeah. So if we're making a goal in a pain state, as soon as the pain is lessened, that doesn't mean the goal necessarily goes away, but it's really hard to move forward with it because you're not in that state. So making it when you're grounded and feeling kind of refreshed and you're hydrated, that's a great time to make goals, because the things that we want to work toward will be there. And again, so coming from the pain state, which I've made a ton of resolutions that way. I've made a ton of goals where I was like, oh, just eat a pizza, and you're like, oh, I'm full and I feel gross. Now it's time to like lose some weight. And you're like, yeah, as soon, like, 4 hours later, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. So,
Same.
but so I did not plan on talking about this, but I made the connection in that I wanted to become a morning person. That's not new information for those of you guys listening on the podcast. I wanted to become a morning person. And when I really thought about it and got honest and wrote it down. So for me, when I write things down, I make a better connection. That's a brain thing too. What I realized is that I wasn't getting that great of sleep. So when I said, why, and how does that look in me? I asked the question. Really what it came to me is the glass of wine at night, or two. That, as if anybody in here, there's some people that are way more sensitive to alcohol, and there is something as you start hitting perimenopause, or if you just don't like it or whatever, it can affect your sleep and how deeply you are and how you're getting into REM sleep. And so there's this kind of almost hidden thief that happens if you drink at night. And again, you don't have to be in a gutter. You could be like, that's enough to mess my sleep up, that challenges me in the morning, and that's keeping me from my goal. And so literally I did an experiment with curiosity, gamifying it, going like, what does it look like if I don't do that at night? Because it was just habit, and we are a culture that drinks, and that'll probably be a podcast someday too. And I'm not on any kind of soapbox. I really kind of tried to just look at what was going to work for me and just tried it out with no expectation for, I'm going to do it for this long or whatever. It's like, how does it look today? And, we're almost 3 years later, where honestly, that was a turning point that changed my sleep. I am productive in the morning. I am becoming, that's a forever goal for me, to be a morning person, to really feel productive and light and happy and wanting to, even if it wasn't a horrible thing before, I'm not in any pain state. I still want to be that. That was one thing that was keeping me from it. And so the whole loop, and you may find that too, if you're listening, that you'll have a rabbit hole. You'll start asking some questions as you distill it down. And, Claire, I love it. You ask the why. Sometimes I'll throw in and what does that look like in me? And a question of, and then what happens? So I kind of ask those leading questions to myself in that way. And that's how I got to, let's take this thing out, see if that has a tumbleweed effect all the way down. And for me, it did. So I love that in that respect. Talk about surprise and delight. Had no idea that that was having an effect on things. And so I take it from a very humble place of, I do not have all the answers. I do not, and I will continue. I will continue to grow and go through seasons where I have different interests, and my life situation changes. Sometimes if you're raising littles, those seasons are longer, but you'll have more choices. And when you stay curious and you're just trying different things, you can make each chapter the best one. But that means that everything's up for examination, and keeping it a game and being curious and just trying different things allows you to find the best path for you. So off of soapbox for me, but that was a big one. That was a big one.
Well, that actually plays in really well to what the third strategy focus is when you talked about making it a game, because the not so great strategy or what you want to avoid is one, if you have a goal that takes a lot of concentration, there's a lot of steps, or you just know it's going to be a lot of work. Maybe that's not the best way to frame it, but again, concentration, you have to think too much. So what's the flip side? What's better? Keep it simple. And so we talked about, Mom, just a little while ago, that it's the small things that matter. And what's really, I actually took a step back in this break between the seasons of our podcast, and I thought, okay, what do I really want to let shine through? Like, what is my focus for season 2? And although we've said it many, many times, I feel like it's always worth repeating. It's those small things that matter. And what really landed for me is, if you're not like on your deathbed today and you're realizing and deciding to embrace it's the small things that matter, then you've got time to make huge changes. Like, it's so empowering and cool and exciting. I don't know if you could hear, I'm smiling, like thinking and talking about it. And so that's something that I feel like I need to continue to share. It's the small things that matter. And there was a study that came out that compared people that have, who we would call have really strong willpower. They hit every goal that they want, all the habits they want to do. And what they found is that it's not that willpower is some trait that you're born with and, oh, that person has more willpower than me and I'll never get that. Oh, no. It's that the people with quote unquote strong willpower have set themselves up for their habits to be as easy for them as possible. They've removed all the barriers. They've made the simplest steps to get towards their goals, because that's what's successful. And going back to making it like a game, like you said, Mom, for me, one of my goals is I have planners. I buy too many planners, but I want to have my day more organized. And I feel like you said, writing it down is more helpful for me. But then I don't go back and read it. So what's the point?